You're listening to Psych with Mike. For more episodes or to connect with the show with comments, ideas, or to be a guest, go to www.psychwithmike.com. Follow the show on Twitter @PsychWithMike or like the Facebook page @PsychWithMike. Now, here's Psych with Mike. Welcome into the Psych with Mike library. This is Dr. Michael Mahan, and I'm here with Mr. Brett Newcomb.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm great.
So we started off talking this morning about what a great dad you are.
Did we?
Yeah.
Was I there for that?
Well, yeah, you were talking about that your son was navigating the shoals of life and that you were there to give him guidance and direction.
I did. I think what I said was, you're a grown man, you figure it out. And he found out to be just inordinately helpful, I'm sure.
Yeah. So, on a scale of 1, you didn't know I was going to do this, but on a scale of
I still don't.
1 to 10, 1 being horrible, 10 being great, how would you rate your dadness? And so the second time around, not the first time around.
I was just going to say, I have 2 sons. You'd have to ask them both. One would get close to 1, one would get close to 10.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I'm saying you, not them.
7.
Yeah. Yeah. See, I'd fancy myself a 9, maybe a high 8.
Yeah, but you're delusional.
But then I have 2 children as well, and if you ask them...
Well, but you have to, when you answer these questions, you have to think in terms of intentionality and reality.
Yeah.
My intention was to be a 10. The reality might have been significantly less.
Right.
Depending on whom one asks.
Yeah. So, if you could, because I can boil this down, I've thought about this a lot, and I don't know if you can respond to this just off the cuff, but if you could boil it down to a single most important quality, what would you say the most important thing to do as a parent would be?
Attending.
Yeah.
I have to pay attention. I have to track and be aware of what he's doing, how he feels, what's going on with him, without being snoopy, without being controlling, but just to attend.
Yeah.
I mean, it's you use the same set of skills you learn to do therapy, because therapy in many ways, is we've talked about, is reparenting. And so you have to pay attention, and then you have to reality check. And this is what I think I saw. Did I see that? Is that what's going on with you? In a non-threatening, non-aggressive, safe way, so that your child can respond to you and say yes or no, or I don't know. And that those answers are appropriate.
Yeah. And I've always said that the most important thing that you could do as a parent is to teach your children to genuinely, sincerely love themselves, not in a narcissistic or entitled way.
So I am seeing a therapist currently.
Okay, you want to put that out there? Okay.
I don't mind.
Okay.
I believe in therapy. I believe in the process.
I believe in it as well.
But this week, we had a conversation exactly about this. I snapped at my son, who's 24 and still living at home, the other day about something. And a few minutes later, my wife got me alone, and she said, "You were a jerk. Why are you being a jerk?" And I'm like, "Well, I didn't intend to be a joke. I thought I was being funny." And she said, "Well, nobody thought you were funny." And
that's a really thin line.
Apparently it is, yes. And apparently it's one I rarely recognize. But so I went and found my son and said, "Look, I want to apologize. Mom said I was being a jerk, and I do not intend to be a jerk, so I'm sorry." He said, "Well, I didn't experience you that way." And I said, "Mom did, and Mom's never wrong, so just take the apology." He's like, "Okay," and we hugged, and it was fine. But when I was in therapy, we were talking about the fact that this had happened, and I was saying I really don't like myself when I have those flash reactions that come out as anger about something. And I don't know what the trigger is. So as we discussed it, what came into my consciousness was, as a child, I was required to attend to my father with hypervigilance for any kind of mood shift, any kind of expectation, any kind of feeling that he might have. Because if I got it wrong, it was dangerous, and I got hurt, things got broken, bones, plates, whatever. I remember one time he took a boiling coffee pot off the stove and threw it at me. And I ducked, and it shattered against the wall, and coffee went all over the place that I later had to clean up. But so what my awareness was in talking to my therapist about it was, I Spencer is meticulous in everything that he does, and he's ADD, so he gets hyper focused on something and is totally distracted. So he was in the kitchen doing something, and I wanted that space because it was time for me to fix my lunch.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that I'm sending out the nonverbal signals and cues that you need
says,
to get out of the way because I'm ready to do something.
Yeah.
And he totally didn't get them. And I got angry. And I got angry because he didn't learn as a child to be aware of me to the point that whenever I radiated something, he could respond to it. And then I was able to acknowledge that I didn't intend to raise him that way. I didn't want him to learn that. But in that flash moment, that trigger moment, my dead father came and yelled at him the way he used to yell at me. And so that helped me understand what I had done as a parent that was good and what I had done personally that was bad. So going back to our previous conversation about guilt and remorse, felt a lot of remorse about that. Not guilt, but remorse. And it helped me recognize and globalize the understanding to consider that when similar things occur.
Right.
When I have that flash of snarkiness that I don't like and usually deny, but if somebody else gently points it out to me and I can recognize, yeah, I guess I did that, now I have a better understanding of where it's coming from.
And if people don't know what we're talking about with the guilt and remorse, then you can look back and find that episode. That was a really good episode. So not to toot our own horn, but to toot our own horn.
I think it posted on the 15th of May.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, I didn't know that, but that's helpful.
Yeah, there you
go. That would be even easier to be able to find it. So if people are listening to us on the I-10 radio waves in Coachella Valley, we want to say welcome, and we hope that you have been enjoying Psych with Mike. We would encourage you to check out some of the episodes on psychwithmike.com. And as always, if you are listening to us on the podcast or anywhere else, check us out on YouTube and on iTunes and give us a subscription, a like, and a comment, and that is always really appreciated. But we have been talking about this idea of, what would be good parenting, and the goal there for me, at least, and I'll ask you, I think you would agree with this, the goal as a parent is to raise as functional an offspring as possible.
Oh, always, yeah.
Yeah. And so for me, that's why the whole idea of teaching them to love themselves is so important, because if you love yourself, and I don't want to go through the whole psychodynamic perspective on how we generate our ability to emotionally regulate and attach, but all of those things will be good if a person can genuinely, sincerely love themselves. And it's when we don't learn how to love ourselves that we feel insecure, and it leads to a lot of that pathology. And when we're living in the times that we're living in during the pandemic, those things are exacerbated. And we were talking earlier before we came up to the studio about, my gym is in my home. So I've still been able to continue to exercise because I have a gym in my home. But a lot of people don't, and so the gyms have been closed down, and we were talking about what are people doing to be able to process their anxiety and be able to work through that. And so everything is exacerbated psychologically, physically, all of these things people are dealing with, and they're either dealing with them or they're not. They're ignoring them. And we had talked about that. They're either dealing with them or they're ignoring them. If you don't know whether you're dealing with them, then you're ignoring them.
Right. And then they'll explode at some point.
Right.
Explode or implode. You'll collapse. And then be like, why did this happen?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so what I am really concerned about, and I've been working in the field of suicide for a long time. I've done suicide workshops for coal miners. I've done them for adolescents. I've done them for first responders, both fire departments and ambulance services and police officers. And I'm really concerned right now that the two things that are most prominently associated with increased suicidality are financial disruption and social disconnection. And both of those things are prevalent. And when you have an exacerbation of this mental fatigue that people may not be processing, I'm really concerned about what that is going to mean. And I don't know if anybody's tracking this yet. I haven't seen any numbers.
I haven't either.
And my guess is that we won't track it until after the fact, because right now we're tracking all of the other things.
Well, I think they'll track the numbers, and you'll see something comes out. It's gone up 4.6% in the last 3 months among these age groups. But I don't know that they will find or attribute causation to either of those or other categories. They just say it's going up.
Yeah.
And so we need to be more conscious of people's mental health concerns.
Right.
Especially in hard times. So I think that's generically a true statement. We need to be more conscious of people's concerns in hard times.
Yeah, and all the way through this, we've been saying that consistently, that, we want people to, if you can't physically be present with somebody, to emotionally be present with somebody, check on a neighbor, deliver a meal, do things.
Well, for me, and I have similar experience with suicide workshops that I have presented and suicidal clients and people that I've worked with. The thing that I found most helpful to learn as a therapist is that by talking to someone about their feelings or fears or thoughts about suicide, you're not going to increase the likelihood of a suicide attempt.
Right.
And if you are in touch with somebody that is immediately suicidal, then you can ground them by asking them specific questions, such as, who's going to feed your dog if you kill yourself today? You love your dog's trapped in the house with you, what's going to happen to your poor dog? Or if you can ask them questions like, what is different today than yesterday? These things that are going on in your life were there yesterday in 99% of the cases. So what changed? What is different? Tell me exactly how it changed overnight. Was it a conversation? Was it an experience? Was it you got your bank statement? I mean, what was it? And then let's reality test that. Because grinding, the suicidal efforts occur in a miasma, in a fog, in most cases that I've read or heard about, had any experience with. If you can ground them out of the fog on some concrete place to stand, then the immediacy of the urge passes, and there's a greater chance that they won't act on the impulse.
Right.
But you got to catch them and ground them.
Yeah, and so that's the most important thing, is the understanding and the acceptance that talking about it doesn't make it more likely that somebody's going to act. It actually makes it less likely. But the reason that I think most people feel like that they shouldn't talk about it is because it's uncomfortable. I think we've developed that belief system based on a need to insulate ourselves from our own fear.
Yes, and our sense of responsibility. If I don't get this right, you'll die, and it'll be my fault.
Yeah.
I have to let go of that.
Right.
I mean, I have to do what I can do, but it's not my fault. And I remember, and you find whatever hook you can hang it on to keep them alive today.
Yeah.
Let's
let me ask you a question about this, because and this is just a personal kind of stylistic choice. I'm not saying that I have any research to back this up. I don't feel comfortable with, I don't try and use guilt as a tool. So like if you say, okay, who's going to feed your dog? I would probably not use that, because the what's different today than yesterday, definitely. But I don't know that I like the idea of using the guilt.
To me, it's not like the idea. Does it work? Is it empirical?
Yeah.
And in the immediate moment where I am convinced that in the next 20 minutes you're going to kill yourself, if I can get you past that 20 minutes, if I can get you to hang on for another day, then we can process this conversation and massage it later. For instance, I had a client that was severely suicidal for a considerable period of time, and regular critical episodes. And this client was a mother, and she had a 10-year-old son. And I was able to talk to her in some of her more intensely suicidal moments about what I know about children whose parents commit suicide, and the fact that those children always blame themselves. If I were a better son, if I did better in school, if I cut the grass or cleaned the house or cooked the dinner, Mom wouldn't have done this. And no matter what her motivation and need was, she needed to understand that she would leave her son with a burden she wouldn't want him to have to carry. And in every conversation, she embraced that and was able to get through the crisis of the moment. And now, 20 years later, her son is a grown man and very successful, and she's still doing well. But she went through a series of crises, where that seemed to be the only possible move to make. And in every case, she held herself back because she valued that boy and what would happen to him more than she valued herself.
So then, if I'm tracking this, what I'm hearing you say is that that wasn't a guilt situation. Well, but you're saying that you were more trying to help her project herself into a future where she hadn't acted on these things and was able to get through it more than you were saying, and it'll be your fault that he'll be
No,
scarred.
I wasn't saying it would be your fault.
Right.
I'll be saying you need to understand that typically this is what happens, and whether you intend it or not, that's going to be the reality.
Yeah.
Would you wish that reality for him?
And that's right. That's what I'm saying, is that I've seen people say, if you do this, then this person will be injured, and that's by implication then your fault. That's what I mean by the guilt. But I hear what you're saying, the using that as a way of projecting yourself into a future where you didn't act, and then were able to have your son grow up and be a successful person. I think that's completely different. I would have no problem with that whatsoever. And, everything comes down to how you phrase it and how you perceive it. So if we have somebody who is suicidal and we were talking to them, the first thing that we want to do is we want to recognize that talking about it doesn't ever cause somebody to act. It actually makes them less likely.
Right.
And I would argue you have to be bold about talking about it.
Absolutely.
So you can't be wishy-washy or scared or tentative. The more that you are that, the more that you are projecting to this person that you are scared, you're wishy-washy.
So as a
you're
clinician,
tentative.
you are trained that one of the first conversations or parts of conversations that you have with new clients is the conversation about confidentiality. What you share with me is confidential between you and I. It's almost like a sacrament in a religious group. But there are two exceptions to that. If I become aware, maybe three exceptions. If I become aware that you are harming a specific known child in a specific way, I'm required by law to report that, and I will do so. There's no confidentiality there.
Under the age of 18 or over the age of 65. So it's on both ends.
On both ends.
Yeah.
Second, if I become aware or convinced that you are suicidal or homicidal, I must report that and will do so ethically and absolutely. And there, no variance for that, no apology for that, no explanation for that. This is the way it works. This is who I am as a therapist. This is what I do. Other than those things, what you share with me is you have confidentiality. And I think that's goes to your thing about not being afraid to engage the conversation. As a therapist, and I would say as a family member or a concerned friend, a lover, whomever, you should hear the point that you don't need to be afraid to engage the conversation if you think they're suicidal, or ask them, are you suicidal? And then there's what you and I learned to call the scale of lethality. What is your plan? How much specificity is there? Do you have the means, the wherewithal? Do you have a gun? Do you have a knife? Is it a knife you would use? I have a kitchen full of knives, but there's only one that I would use. Somehow they think that way. And I remember a different client who gave me the bullets from her gun and said, here, you keep the bullets. I won't kill myself because I don't have any bullets. I said, you got other bullets at home. She said, but these are the ones. And so years later, she came back and said, do you still have the bullets? And I'm like, yeah. Can I have them? I said, yeah. Are you beyond all
suicidal?
that? Yeah. And she said, not anymore. I said, okay, you can have them back. It's your property. But it's intriguing how people set up a refuge, an anchor, a way to protect themselves, at least make the effort to do that if other people are aware and know to take it seriously. Men in particular want to have a tendency to just dismiss it as being unmanly or unmasculine.
Right.
Like, oh, you sissy, you're not brave enough to do that. Why would you do, and they want to debate it and rebut it and challenge it in demeaning ways, diminishing ways. I think that's a mistake. You have to be compassionate. You have to have empathy. You have to understand, but you have to help clarify. You both support and you reality test. What is? So let's awfulize this. What happens if you have to file for bankruptcy? And what do you walk away with? What do you mean? Well, you lose everything. I said, no, under bankruptcy laws, you don't. Let's talk about your concerns. Do you have a home? Do you have a car? Do you have, and you start trying to be specific about those things. That helps them think and anchor to something and reduces the risk factor.
And even just in the very beginning, I say to clients very point blankly, have you ever thought about hurting yourself?
Yeah.
And they're sometimes taken aback. They're like, oh, no one's ever said that to me.
Before, yeah.
And I said,
they pull their sleeves down over their wrists.
Right. And especially because then if I say, I sense that not only have you thought about that you have thought about it recently, you might be thinking about it now. And they're like, well, how do you know that? Well, because, we're trained observers, and it's not really that hard. I mean, anybody would be able to see those markers if they wanted to. And if you have the concern about this, then two things that I would recommend that people do. Number one is I would recommend that they confront it as we're talking about, that they talk about it and try and process that.
Well, yeah, because if you can get the dialogue started,
right.
I mean, one of the things they may learn, and one of the frequent thought patterns around suicidality, especially among adolescents, is I will kill myself and then you will be sorry.
Right.
You have hurt me in some way, whatever that way may be. And if I kill myself, then you'll know how bad you hurt me, and that'll make you suffer. That's a totally irrational thing, but it's often the way people think about it.
Absolutely.
And you can talk to them about how irrational that is and what the alternative ways of understanding reality are. And it's a different conversation than somebody that says, I want to die. It's kind of like the alcoholic. I want to die to stop the pain. I drink to stop the pain. And so then you talk about what is the pain? Where's the pain coming from? What hurts so badly that the only way forward is to just end your life?
But if you are honest and genuine and sincere in your conversation about it and upfront, I say to people all the time, I believe you have the right to be self-directed. I believe that includes taking your own life if that's what you want. I don't think that I don't agree with the conclusion, but I agree that you have the right. But because I hold a state license that says that I must try and do everything in my power to prevent that, I will do that. But I believe that you have the right. If you start having those conversations, you take away the perception, I'll kill myself and you'll feel bad. And if you take away the perceived reward, it makes it less palatable to engage in the behavior.
Right. Yeah.
And so being honest and genuine and confronting these things, being bold about that, takes away the individual's perceived reward.
Well, if you have enough of a relationship that your opinion would be significant to them. Early days, that's not necessarily so.
Sure.
But if you've been doing therapy with them for a while, that should be a reality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you don't feel confident being able to charge in and be bold and take this on, then get help. So call someone who is local that could help you intervene. We will put the suicide hotline number on the show notes. So for anybody who would have this concern, you can call somebody and get advice and help. Because that's really important. But you can also just call a local healthcare professional. Any local healthcare professional should be able to give you some guidance and help you intervene or intervene themselves should that become necessary.
Yeah, yeah. There also are secondary strategies that I think we should mention. There's something called suicide by cop. That is not an uncommon. I mean, when you talk to enough people over time and they are in pain and they are expressing, I'm driving down the highway and I come to a bridge abutment, and sometimes I just get an impulse to jerk the wheel of the steering wheel and crash into the bridge abutment. Those are impulsive feelings that come from somewhere. And if we can process those and digest those, we can alleviate them. Rarely, as far as we know, does someone actually follow through on that,
Right.
where the impulse
That's right.
is there and they pull the steering wheel and they run into the bridge abutment and kill themselves. But sometimes you get a situation where someone, and we know this in part because they do what's called a psychological autopsy after one of these suspicious deaths. And somebody has determined to commit suicide, but maybe they have a religious, ethical,
Right.
I can't go to heaven if I commit suicide. I can't be buried in hallowed ground if I commit suicide. But if I can get somebody to kill me, then I won't have committed suicide. It'll be on them. And so they frequently will set themselves up with cops, where cops will shoot them in order to protect someone else or themselves because they view you as a danger. So you point an unloaded gun at a police officer, they don't know it's unloaded, so they shoot you, you get your wish, you're dead, and the responsibility's on them, so you get to go to heaven.
And one of the things that I think is really important for people to understand is that people who are really intent on the act of taking their own lives will not talk about it because they don't want to be stopped. And so people who are talking about it are people who are on the fence.
Well, and a lot of times they are bargaining with God.
Yeah.
I will position myself so that I can die, and if you really want me dead, you'll let me die. And if not, you'll see that I'm rescued. And I remember when I was teaching high school many years ago, this girl always came home at a certain time of the day, and her mother knew that she always was home at a certain time of the day. So the mother took pills half hour before the girl was supposed to come
would
home.
find her. Yeah.
So the girl would find her, call the cops, and then she would get some attention that she couldn't get some other way to address whatever her issue was. But the girl was delayed from school and
Right.
didn't get home in time.
Missed the
And
bus, whatever.
The mom
just
died.
that one day. Right.
But repeat attempters cut the margin of safety shorter and shorter and shorter, and they eventually die by mistake because they're not really intending to die. They're intending to make some kind of an undeniable statement that they are in incredible pain and need help.
Absolutely.
They want something to be different, and they don't think they can get anybody to hear them or anybody to care enough to do something about it. So they do this extreme test of God. I'm willing to be dead now if you don't want me alive. But if you want me alive, you'll show me by this intervention, and I'll stay alive for a while.
So in the end, I think that is probably the truth of suicide in a nutshell, is that people who feel that way are in extreme psychological pain. And that's
absolutely.
something that we need to be acutely aware of. So hopefully this was helpful for people if you're having this as something that you know that is a concern, or just will raise your level of awareness, because as we all move through this, it's something that we all need to be aware of. And all of the music that is presented in Psych with Mike is written and performed by Mr. Benjamin DeClue. And as always, if it's Friday, it's Psych with Mike.